You know how a simple disagreement can sometimes just explode? Well, we're going to dive into a story from Mesa, Arizona, where a request to build a garage turned into an all-out legal war. It's a classic fight that ended up in court, forcing a judge to decide who's really in charge, the homeowners or their HOA.
This sentence right here, this is the spark. From the official meeting minutes, no less. Verbally threatened the committee. You can just feel the tension in those words, right? This is the exact moment a totally routine neighborhood meeting went off the rails and became a legal battle that would question the very power structure of the community.
Okay, so let's rewind to that day. We're in the Whisper Mountain community. The Architectural Review Committee, or ARC for short, is meeting to review a homeowner's plan for a new garage. On paper, this should be a pretty straightforward, kind of boring meeting.
So let's look at who was in the room. You've got the homeowners, the Wells family, just trying to get their project approved. And then you have the ARC, a committee of their neighbors whose job it is to say yes or no. But here's a detail you absolutely need to remember. The guy leading the committee, Greg Wingert, was also the president of the entire elected HOA board. That's a lot of hats for one person to wear, and that dual role, it's about to become a huge deal.
As you can guess, the whole thing just fell apart. It got heated, and the official record says it ended because of threats. So think about what that means. No decision was ever made. No vote was taken on the garage. Just chaos. The community's own process completely broke down, and everybody was left hanging.
So after that total disaster of a meeting, the HOA's elected board of directors, led by, you guessed it, that same guy, Mr. Wingert, decided, okay, we're stepping in.
And wow, did things escalate quickly. Look at this. July 17th, you have the big argument. Less than 3 weeks later, on August 6th, the board just suspends the entire committee. A month after that, the board just goes ahead and approves the garage themselves. And by October, they're getting sued by a member of the very committee they just kicked to the curb. It was like one domino knocking over the next.
Now, the board's official story was pretty clean. They said, hey, we're just hitting the pause button. We need to review the rules, make sure everything is consistent and safe. Sounds pretty responsible, right? Well, one person involved saw it as something else entirely, a pure power grab.
And that person was N. Wayne Dwight Jr., a member of that suspended committee. He wasn't just going to sit back and take it. He filed a lawsuit. His whole argument was that the board had zero right to dissolve his committee and take over its duties. He claimed they broke the community's own rules, its own constitution.
And that really boils the whole legal battle down to one single question. Did the board actually have the authority to do what they did? The answer wasn't going to be found in he said, she said. It was buried deep in the fine print of the community rulebook.
Okay, so this is where a neighborhood drama turns into a fascinating legal puzzle. The case wasn't really about who was being unreasonable anymore. It was all about a very technical, very specific point. Who was reading the rules correctly?
Now, if you've ever lived in a neighborhood with an HOA, you know all about these things. The CC&Rs. They're the Bible, the Constitution for the whole community. They dictate everything from what color you can paint your front door to, in this case, who has the power to appoint and, more importantly, to remove people from a committee.
So check this out. This is the legal deadlock. The petitioner, Mr. Dwight, pointed to the literal words in the rules. It says the board can appoint members, but the word remove, it's nowhere in there. So his conclusion was kind of wild. His appointment was for life. The HOA, on the other hand, was like, that's absurd. Their argument was that the power to appoint has to include the power to remove. Otherwise, what's the point of an elected board if they have no control?
So you have two completely opposite readings of the exact same rule. The whole thing landed on the desk of a judge whose job was basically to untangle this mess and pick a winner. And the verdict came back crystal clear. The board wins. The judge ruled that the HOA did have the right to suspend the committee. But honestly, the verdict itself isn't the most interesting part here. It's how the judge got there that's so telling.
The judge basically broke it all down. First, she just came right out and said it. The community's own rulebook was, and I quote, not well written. Ouch. Second, and this is so important, she flat out rejected the idea of lifetime appointments, calling them undemocratic. She then reasoned that the elected board must have inherited all the powers the original developer had, and all of that led her to one conclusion. The board had every right to remove the committee members.
And this quote from the decision, man, it just hits the nail on the head. The judge basically said that if Mr. Dwight's argument were true, You'd have this strange situation where a group of unelected, untouchable people had more power than the leaders the community actually voted for. It would completely destroy the whole idea of community control.
So what does this story from a quiet Arizona neighborhood mean for the rest of us? Well, it's a huge reminder that for any community with an HOA, the entire power structure can hang on just a few vague words in a legal document. And when those rules are unclear, you create this power vacuum that often only a judge can sort out.
When you strip away all the drama about the garage and the threats, this whole fight boils down to a really fundamental question of how we govern ourselves. When the rules aren't clear, who gets the final say? The appointed experts or the elected leaders? The court in Whisper Mountain gave its answer. But it definitely leaves you wondering, if this happened in your neighborhood, who do you think would win?